from 2019, 20, 21, 22, I filed more FLSA cases in federal court in the US than any other lawyer. It was super fun.
My guest today built the nation's largest wage and hour practice, scaled it to 37 people, and then made the hard decision to scale it down. That's Josh Sanford, co-founder of EKSM LLP, a consumer class action firm based in Houston, and co-founder of a SaaS platform for attorney referral management now used by thousands of lawyers. He scaled one of the highest volume wage and hour practices in the country and filed more FLSA cases than anyone in the US.
But the margins were going down. There was some stuff happening in the marketplace, and it just became less and less profitable. And so after scaling up, we had to make a very, very hard decision in October of 22 to scale down.
Today, Josh shares what he learned building firms the hard way and how that changed how he builds law firms now. By the end of this conversation, you'll have a framework for when to hire a non-lawyer to run your firm as a business, the assembly line case processing model Josh used to handle national FLSA volume, how EKSM built a systems-first firm from day one, why Josh offered his marketing team a 20% raise in exchange for cutting their workday in half using AI. I'm Julien Emery, and this is the Scalable Law Blueprint. Josh, I am stoked to be chatting with you. And I think the first place that would be great to start is, can you just describe for the audience and for me, sort of give us a sense of your journey as a lawyer, the firms that you've built, because you're doing some unique things and you've done some unique things. So maybe just give us a quick 30,000 foot view on you and your background.
Yeah, but before I do that, can I tell you that I think 2 weeks from today is what would qualify as my silver anniversary as a lawyer. I'll be a lawyer for 25 years on April 2nd or April 4th or something like that. So
congrats.
I'm right there. I was eminently unhireable out of law school. And so I started my own firm in 2001 in a small town in Arkansas. And I was there for about 8 years. I started hiring some people. And then I wanted to move to the big city of Little Rock. And in 2009, we opened another office here, which is where I am now. I've been here for 17 years. I mean, different offices, same city, and hired more and more and more. And then around 2011 or 12, I got really excited about the Fair Labor Standards Act because I was just doing a bunch of general stuff and started making some money representing people who hadn't been paid proper wages. And I really enjoyed these cases that were about the law, and they weren't people's emotions and people's lives being destroyed by other people or catastrophes or whatever, just kind of fighting about money and doing a lot of brief writing and stuff like that. We ended up deciding that we wanted to grow a big wage and hour practice. And so that's what we did. And from 2019, 20, 21, 22, I filed more FLSA cases in federal court in the US than any other lawyer. It was super fun. We were having a blast building a big team. We got ourselves up, big, by my standards. We got ourselves up to 37 people. And about half of those were lawyers, maybe 20 of them. But the margins were going down. There was some stuff happening in the marketplace in terms of arbitration agreements and rulings from different circuits and the US Supreme Court. And it just became less and less profitable. And so after scaling up, we had to make a very, very hard decision in October of 22 to scale down. And so that's what we did. And that is not the end of the story. There's so much that's happened since then, but that's kind of phase one of my career.
What lessons did you learn along the way in scaling up, just of how to scale up? And also why did you decide to scale down? Where it sounds like margins started getting less. And so maybe no matter how big you got, the margins weren't great, but maybe walk us through the decisions there and the learnings on scaling up and why you scaled down.
Yeah, I think that it is easy when you're good at something to think that being good at that thing is enough to protect you forever. And so we were good at getting wage and hour cases and we were good at winning them. But there were issues way out of our control, whether or not employers could have arbitration agreements that were cutting into our margins. And I was so happy to be doing what I was doing, which was representing the most number of people that I could at any given time. And I ignored what I knew was true about the financial realities of what we were doing, because we had to have class certification in a certain percentage of our cases, or else we weren't going to be profitable because we were losing money on individual cases in the aggregate. And but I was so enamored of the work, and just I believed in my team so much. I really, really did not want to stop the music. But my partner in the business, he knew that things were not going to last forever. And like 6 months before we shut the front door of the business, he got me to read a book called The Hard Thing About Hard Things. I read it twice, and that prepared me for one of the hardest things I've had to do as a leader.
If the revenue per case, if I'm reading between the lines correctly, the revenue per case or margin per case wasn't sustainable. But if you put that to the side, you were handling a high volume of cases. What were the operational bottlenecks to be able to execute on those cases? Let's assume that there was the right margin mix. Like, how did you actually get to that size?
Our business was kind of modeled in some ways on the personal injury firms that just go out and like acquire a lot of plaintiffs. But we're doing a very, very different work, because for us, we had to file a case in federal court as quickly as possible because the statute of limitations was running every paycheck. These cases have to be resolved through the court system with the approval of a court. And so what we found was that we were great at getting cases and analyzing whether or not there was a valid wage claim there. We had to systematize the steps of getting that client's claim processed efficiently. So like we had marketing and intakes, and we had an intakes attorney who's like evaluating things. Then what we did when we signed a client was we sent their claim to a complaint drafting attorney. And she had one job, which was to draft these federal court pleadings for all over the country with the facts from each case. And then she would draft it, and then she never touched the file again. And then it went to a litigation attorney who had, a system of paralegals and support staff and law clerks and all that. And then those people kind of worked in pods and processed the case from filing through resolution. And then we actually developed a position for like a settlement attorney. And then that guy was in charge of handling all of the settlement processes from, MOU until disbursement. And so we stratified things so that we were getting people to be able to do only what they were like really good at.
It's almost like it's an assembly line sort of, right? Where you're like, this step.
Yes, it was. And it wasn't flawless. I will tell you that like the clients were like, okay, well, I talked to an intakes attorney, and now I'm talking to someone who's writing my lawsuit. And then now I'm getting introduced to a paralegal, and then they're with the paralegal and the lawyer for, 6 months to a year and a half. And then they're with a settlement attorney. And like, so we had to do education for them along the way, and like try to do pretty like warm handoffs through the process. But we had good people, and so it worked. But it wasn't without kind of like learning moments with clients, having to bring them along to understand why we were focused on moving their case through our firm rather than like they get someone who holds their hand the entire time and then nothing ever changes. We just couldn't do it that way. It wasn't efficient.
You were doing everything and maybe had one or two people working the entire case end to end, probably at a small scale. And then you probably hit a point where like, okay, the only way to grow is if we split this up and like compartmentalize this and have this step and this step. There's a lot of attorneys I've talked to that can't make that leap. It's like, oh, everything is bespoke, everything is unique. You must be the smartest person in the world to navigate a client from A to B. What about you, your mindset, your thinking, whatever? Like, what allowed you to take that next step and be like, no, we can document this and scale it?
The guy that I hired to run the firm in 2019, when we were already at 12 lawyers or something like that, he had never been to law school, didn't know anything about the law. He just had been running a business. So he came in and said, okay, this is a business. You're trying to produce certain outcomes. Let's figure out what's the most efficient way to do that. And then let's also figure out like what skills do the people on your team have? Let's put them in the best seats for them to accomplish what they're good at in ways that give them rewards and benefit the client, and like break things up. And it was so funny because when he came in, I had some lawyers and they were just like, oh, bro, this does not work for me. Like, first of all, I'm not going to have someone who's not a JD tell me the best way to get a case managed through a series of gates that it needs to pass, because I'm a lawyer and I'm brilliant and I have all this judgment. Those people didn't last long. We got them out of here. Not a good fit.
Talking about the podcast, the Scalable Law Blueprint, we talk to people all the time about scaling law firms. I always tell people, like, if you don't want to scale and grow, like, that's totally fine. What I always get frustrated at is like the people that are trying to grow, but then they're like, oh no, but like, it's got to be like this bespoke thing.
Okay, so do you believe that there are like size constraints that like you bump up against and then you have to kind of level up in terms of your skills to run a business?
I think there's my own personal view on this is I think there's the business only grows as much as the founder's mindset can grow it. And so what I've seen is, not just in law, by the way, across all businesses, like you hit a barrier based on where your own thinking and mindset is at. And to your point, you have to step outside and kind of you have to think about the business differently and how to get to the next level. And I see a lot of people hitting that ceiling and maybe not recognizing that they need to unblock something or how they're thinking about it to be able to get to that next level.
It's fine if they don't want to. But stay where you're at, but the skills that got you to where you are not going to be the skills that get you to go 2x or 4x or 10x.
Did you have that mindset from day one, or did you hit a certain point? You're like, oh, I want to keep going and go to the next stage.
I think I was probably the worst bottlenecker in the history of business. For real. There was a time when I had literally everything running through me, a letter going out, a pleading, whatever. I was going to look at it. And it was so dumb. I mean, I was literally working like 90 hours a week or more. I was literally looking at everything. It just it didn't make any sense. I was infantilizing the lawyers who were working for me. They were fine with it because they have no risk. They're like, it's your name going on everything. And it was like, I didn't like it, but I didn't know a way out of it. And so it wasn't until I hired someone to run the firm as a business, that we had to break it down and say, okay, what are we doing here?
Hey, quick question for you. Does your intake and evidence collection process ever feel like the biggest bottleneck in your entire firm? Chasing follow-ups, collecting documents, and just trying to keep everything organized while leads are slipping through the cracks? That's exactly what SuperPanel fixes. It's like a digital teammate that automates everything from first contact all the way through to evidence collection. So nothing gets missed, and your team can focus on clients and legal work and not admin. If that sounds like something your firm needs, scan the QR code or click the link in the show notes to see how it works. Now back to the conversation.
What triggered you to hire the person to run the firm as the business? Like, what was that switch where you're like, oh, I need to hire someone who's like a business person to come in?
So I would say, at a real sort of granular level, I was at the gym playing basketball at lunch one day, and one of my buddies was like, I went to sell some technology to a firm in Arizona, and I met with someone who was running it, and it wasn't a lawyer, it was just someone running the business. And I was like, oh, I never even heard of that. And then the next day, I was like, actually, that sounds really attractive to me. And so I started poking around. I found a great candidate, and so that's granularly, that's how it happened. But the drive, the reason that it appealed to me was that I had been bumping up against my own ceiling, my own set of limitations, literally didn't know what I didn't know. And I needed, if you can't think the thoughts that you need, you got to associate with someone who can think new thoughts for you and introduce them to you. And so that's what happened with me. And so I hired him almost about 7 years ago. And as you know, since the beginning of the podcast, that firm doesn't really exist anymore. It doesn't have any people who work at it. We still have some legacy cases that we're trying to work out. But that guy and I started a software company together that manages referrals in the legal space called Lex Amica. I mean, he's the CEO of it now. They have about 40 employees. They have some of the biggest firms in the US who use it to manage their outbound and inbound referrals. And it's a great business. And he's kind of a little bit of a genius. I got really, really lucky. And so I'm even though I can't believe that this is true, but I'm the co-founder of a software company in the legal tech space. That's weird, but I am. Can I tell you what happened near the end of that business? is we got really good at client acquisition. That was like kind of our thing. We learned I wasn't interested in outsourcing marketing or buying leads or anything like that. We were getting a lot of referrals, and that's actually how we ended up kind of in the solving the referral management issue. But then we took that skill of client acquisition, and I ran into some friends who were doing consumer class action work, and they're like, "Hey, can you get plaintiffs for us?" And so there was like a little period where we stopped taking on new clients at Sanford Law Firm, but we were doing case acquisition for some friends in the consumer class action space, and that like keeping that part of the team on and keeping those skills fresh and getting better at them and improving was what allowed me to start a new business, my new firm, EKSM, that just does consumer class actions. And so, and a lot of that team transferred over. There's probably 8 to 10 people from old Sanford Law Firm who are now at my new firm, which is mostly headquartered in Houston, but then there's like a third of us who are here in Arkansas.
What did you do differently this time from I don't at all what did you do differently, but specifically from systems perspective or how you built this firm? Like what learnings did you do differently here?
My friend Tommy, who was kind of the genius behind like bringing these groups together to do this thing, like a consumer class action firm that you could just like kind of launch into the world and start scaling. We made an agreement that we would do this, but only if we hired a firm administrator who was obsessed with systems and protocols, and like we could run it in a way from day one that allowed us to be have fidelity to our data and transparency, and like really kind of the opposite of what I did from 2001 to 2015, 16, when we just kind of grew organically. When, we just like, we'd add a person here, add a person there. Didn't really know what we were doing. Didn't really have systems. Now that's all we do is systems.
I don't know if this is the same firm or other firms, but you're doing some interesting things in case acquisition. And I think I saw you'd I don't know if this is the same firm or something different where you're partnering with or have partnered with some YouTubers or some YouTube channels. Maybe talk me through just like your thought process on everyone's trying to figure out how to get more leads and like AI is changing the game. Like what tell me what you're doing and why.
Describing me as having thought processes is a little bit like putting makeup on the pig, because I feel like stuff just happens to me in my life. And then it turns out that I met someone who randomly told me the one thing that I needed to know the next day. And then the next day I met the person who would tell me the next thing that I needed to know. And I just like keep having the best learnings and making the best friends. And it just allows me to like keep doing things. But for real, I went to one of the lamest conferences in the legal space. I won't say the name of it. No one would ever go to this conference. And I met this lawyer, Tommy Kirker, who's the K in EKSM. And he was on a panel talking about social media. And, he had about 500,000 followers on YouTube. He had like 750,000 on TikTok and maybe 500,000 on Facebook or something like that. He now has like 900K on Facebook. But anyways, he was like, hey, lawyers should do social media. And I was like, okay, well, I'll start a YouTube channel myself. So
when was this? Well, like what time frame?
I committed to that in December of 21. We made our first video on like December 29th of 2021. You cannot see my first videos. I have privated them. They were
oh God, man, you got to put those out. Those are the best.
Dude, they were so bad. I ended up becoming friends with Tommy, and then we ended up starting a firm together. But he was kind of like my mentor in the YouTube space, and this is something that's like totally foreign to me because I'm not a social media guy. But I started a channel called America's Attorney, and within the next few days, I'll be at 70,000 followers, which is nothing in the big world, but like, I'm really proud of the progress that we make, but, there's no goal. There's just like, the goal is the process, is the progress. That's it. He took me to a YouTube conference, and I met this guy who had a YouTube channel with 2.5 million subscribers, doing legal content called Legal Eagle. He and I hit it off, and I told him about my software company that manages referrals. And I was like, we could take your legal audience, your audience that's consuming legal content on YouTube, and use my new technology to match them with their legal needs to firms all over the country. And so we started doing that in 23. And we're now almost 3 years into it. And he's up to almost 4 million subscribers. And we have this business called Eagle Team, which is a law firm which refers out most of the cases that come in to it. And we use Lexamica, and we just love it. We're able to make sure that his audience is getting matched to the best possible lawyers all over the country, no matter what their claims are. And that's it's super satisfying to me because I became a lawyer because I want to help people. And there's this like tension when a client offers you a case, you're like, ooh, I really want to help them. Also, I really want that money. And you might know, like, in your heart, I'm not the best lawyer for this. Like, but they came to me and I want that fee. So I'm going to do this. But when you can break that chain and say, you know what? I don't need the full fee. I'm going to refer this case to the best lawyer for this case. Then you become aligned around the financial incentives with your client, so that now it's no longer like, hey, can I keep this and get a good fee myself and the client will do well? It's, can I match this to the absolute best firm wherever they are in the country and get the best possible outcome? And so you're serving your client better than you ever have in a very scalable way. And it's like the most ethical, like, I just love it. It resolves every issue that I ever had in terms of like how you feel like a certain way when a client brings you a case, you're like, ooh, this is good for me. And I hate that feeling, because what I really want to do is get the best outcome for the client. So I'm a big fan of referrals.
Who is the best lawyer for a given case? Do you look at sort of data on past performance or anything like that? More just out of curiosity, kind of how you think about that.
It's a mixture of data on past performance. To me, communication and transparency is a really big part of it. And if you're trying to work with a firm that doesn't have the systems in place that allows them to be transparent with you about what's happening with the case, that's really scary. It's not clear that they actually are good, and you can't trust them. And it might be kind of unethical to participate in a relationship with another lawyer where you actually don't know what's happening with the case. And then the results, they kind of speak for themselves, and the client experience. I mean, we're constantly getting feedback from our clients about who they're enjoying working with and who's not communicating well, that sort of thing.
Totally switching gears. You and I talked about in the past on a previous call about your sports background and how that shaped how you operate. And then again today, you brought up how basketball transformed your career. but what, I guess I'm curious, what specific habits or disciplines from sports have you found useful in building the businesses you've built?
I have a daughter who's aged out of youth basketball for her. Like, she played until she was on age 12, right? But she's tall for her age. Couldn't dribble very well. Dude, she could get rebounds, okay? Her coach was never going to put her at point guard, or never going to put her out by the three-point line and tell her to cut to the basket. Her job was to get down low, get some rebounds, put it back up, kick it out, whatever. And one of the things that I've really enjoyed being a leader on various teams is figuring out, like, what are the skills and attributes that the people that I'm working with have, and how can I play to those strengths? I feel like, when you're a kid in school, they're like, oh, you suck at math? Well, we're going to make sure that you learn math. Well, okay, but that's not how it works in the adult world. Like, you go find what you're good at and you just pour gasoline on that. And so my whole mission with my team is to figure out, like, what do you love? Like, what gets you going? And let's give you more of that. And, like, what are you terrible at? Let's make sure you don't do that. And look, I know there's difficult parts of every business. There's hard things that everyone has to do. But, like, if you can focus on figuring out what really gets your teammates going, I feel like you can become such a more effective and enjoyable place for people to work.
When you're putting that into practice, how does that show up in your hiring process to make sure someone is a fit? And then if you put them into a position and you're like, actually, like, their zone of genius or what they're good at is something different, like, I guess, how do you think about hiring and firing in general when you're trying to put people in the optimal seats?
One of the things that I've done very intentionally over the last few years at all of the organizations where we've done hiring is get really clear about what our cultural values are. And we make sure that we're hiring through that lens so that we don't say, oh, this person looks like a good prospect. We hire them and then we say, hey, welcome. Here's what you can expect from a value standpoint from us. No, we're telling it, it's like in the job posting, it's in the interview. We're looking for cultural fits because if you can align around those things and then hire someone who has some talents, if they line up with the spot that you thought they worked for, then great. And if they line up somewhere differently, you can move them around a little bit. And then obviously, I mean, I'm like everybody else. I've made some bad hires. You gotta let people go sometimes.
You talked about the process of I think you're using AI and marketing somehow. And you talked about thinking about before we hire another person in this role, can we automate this? And I guess I'm just curious in your thought process around automation when it comes to scaling a firm and how you think about sort of when to hire or how to implement automations in certain parts of the business.
The first thing I have to say in answering that question is that every lawyer and every leader inside a law firm has to be thinking all of the time, how could AI help me solve this problem? Because if you aren't doing that, the guy across town is, the gal across the hallway is, and I don't think that we're super close to a time where the AI takes everyone's jobs. I think we are very, very, very close to a time where if you can't use the AI to get work done, you can't have a job. And so before we are hiring, we are making sure that the people that we would be assisting with a hire have leveraged their ability to use AI to the greatest extent possible so that we're not just bringing someone in to do a bunch of repetitive tasks that could be done by AI. And I think that you and I talked about this a couple months ago, but the thing that I'm like kind of most excited about in this new year is that we went to the marketing department in December and said, hey, everyone here, it will receive a 20% raise for 2026 as soon as you deliver us a paper that shows how you are going to cut your workday in half using AI. So we're basically saying like, figure out how to work less and we'll pay you tremendously more. Because what I wanted to do with them and what I want to do with all people on my team is get rid of repetitive tasks so that they can sit and think. Because I hire smart people and I want them to think. I want them to actually strategize, and it frees people up to spend more time talking with our team internally, and great stuff happens when teammates talk. And it frees up people to spend more time talking to our vendors and our clients and other law firms. And magic happens when people talk to each other. And my goal is that we're using AI to reduce repetitive tasks, including building out marketing campaigns, launching the marketing campaigns, evaluating what we should and shouldn't run, et cetera. But I want to increase the amount of time that we are all able to talk to each other.
I love that approach too. I haven't heard anyone using that approach with a carrot saying, basically, if you can automate a large chunk of your work, I will pay you more. I'm curious how that's gone. What have they brought to you?
It's been fantastic. We're 2.5 months in, and they've literally cut their workday down from 8 hours to 5.5. They're still here, but they talk to each other more. They think big picture stuff. They're always thinking about strategy stuff now, and they're not frazzled, and they can spend more time being excellent on the things that aren't repetitive. And it's so great. It's but I know what you're saying. It's counterintuitive. I'm saying hey, figure out how to work less and I'll pay you more. But we're on the same team.
Also, the work less and pay you more, I think it's just a one-dimensional way of thinking about it. I think you're thinking about it in a multi-dimension way where you're saying, if you're actually doing less work that looks like work, i.e., pick up block, move it over here, and you're thinking is work. Like your time to reflect is actually productive time, even though you're not thinking about it as productive time. And we're going to get insights, and maybe they go play a basketball game and come up with another idea, and all of a sudden you launch another firm. Like there's all kinds of things that come when people can reflect and think and chat.
You know what shower thoughts are, right? My goal in this was to give them shower time at work. Like I want them just to have enough off of their plate that they can think the things that they need to think that'll help us break through to solve problems that we couldn't have solved if we were so busy.
I love that approach. There's probably a coining of a term in there that you could come up with.
I'll ask Claude.
Yeah, exactly. Something to do with showers and I don't know. I'm not smart enough to come up with it on the spot, but I think that's so important, right? Because that's as we move into this. I mean, we're already in the world, but as we increasingly move to a world where, it's almost like our job is more as AI managers in building systems, and AI is executing certain work. Like we should be thinking about how do we make this better? How do we improve the systems? And you need some thinking time to reflect on that and chat about that. So that makes a ton of sense.
It's not just about AI. It's like
correct. Yes, AI doesn't have to be the
It's like anytime you can stop working in the business to work on it, you can create leverage for yourself, right? Where you can solve a task once and extract value from that same solve 1,000 times or 5,000 times.
I guess one last question: if you're talking to a law firm owner, and maybe they're 4 or 5 people, X number of cases per month, whatever it is, but they're trying to get to that next stage. What's the one piece of advice that you would give them to help grow to the next stage they're trying to get to?
And it's such an interesting question. If they're like 4 or 5 people, I mean, to me, the way that we always grew was related to pain. Like what's hurting the most today? And then we want to solve that. And it lacked strategy. What I think people should be doing in their firms is saying, what is the highest leverage work that anyone on our team does? How can we create an environment where more of that work gets done? And then build around that. And that's how, if I were going back in time, that's how I would do it. And that's not how I did it. Instead, I would just be like, oh, this thing is hurting me so bad. Let's hire another person.
Well, let me ask the question a different way and use your answer from before, because I actually don't think that's an answer for 4 or 5 people. That's an answer for any firm at any size. So what's for any firm at any size trying to get to the next level of growth, next level in terms of number of cases, number of leads, volume of cases filed, whatever. What's the one piece of advice that you would give to that law firm leader?
I would say they have a mindset problem if they have been wanting to grow or change and they can't. And I would say, talk to the people who could mentor you. Like get out of your box, go see what the people who are already doing what you want to do, how they live, how they work, what they're thinking, and start with that as your basis. And I know it's fascinating because lawyers, we fight with each other for a living, right? But there's a lot of collegiality inside our space. But then there's also a lot of I'm not going to give you my secret sauce, especially not in client acquisition, which I think is the way in which, at least on the plaintiff side, we're kind of most at war with each other. Because other than that, a rising tide lifts all boats. But I want all the cases. I don't want you to have them. But once you have cases, I want you to have a good outcome because that helps me. We want all the plaintiffs to do well. But I would just say, get out of the office, meet the people who are already doing what you want to do, because you're not going to figure it out on your own. You're probably not as smart as you think you are. And go meet other people and become friends with them.
And for anyone that wants to follow you, get in touch with you, learn more about your work, where's the best place to do that?
I try to post on LinkedIn, Josh Sanford, periodically. I posted a post today, which the algorithm crushed. It actually had a picture of a bloody paper towel from a bloody nose that I had. And the algorithm didn't like that. But it was a funny story. but it didn't work so well. But anyways, you can find me on LinkedIn at Josh Sanford. If you like to watch YouTube videos with someone wearing a sweatshirt and kind of yelling at the camera about cops violating people's constitutional rights, America's Attorney on YouTube, you can find me there. It's an acquired taste.
I love it. I love it. Josh, I really appreciate it. I think there's a ton of great bits of insight here for the audience, and look forward to chatting further with you offline. And excited to have this published.
Awesome.
Thanks for the time,
man. See ya.
Thanks for checking out the Scalable Law Blueprint. If today's conversation helped you think differently about how your law firm runs, share this episode with a colleague, and don't forget to follow the show so you never miss what's next. To see how automation can transform your intake and operations, visit superpanel.io and discover how leading plaintiff firms scale with confidence. I'm Julien Emery, and I'll see you in the next episode.